Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Astonishingly Simple. I'm here with my mate Josh, and today we're going to talk about a couple of things. And I'm going to kick things off because Josh was just at the Nürburgring 24-hour race, and he took his Aston Martin with him. And I want to know how the road trip went. Josh, tell me a little bit about it.
Well, yeah, it did go totally seamless. I had a little bit of a breakdown out there, but nothing I couldn't fix with the knowledge you gave me with my Foxwell, that's for sure. But yeah, good road trip, did about roughly 2,000 miles in it. So now I am the owner that's done the most miles in that car, which feels good. Although I did break the back on 14,000 miles, so that mileage is now creeping up. It soon won't be the low mileage example of what I got it, but yeah, we're getting that way.
Well, I think driving it is better than just sitting polishing it. So what happened on the trip? Mechanically, did it throw a code or something?
Yeah, so I got a MAF Imbalance code, which in essence, you got two MAFs on these cars, one on each airbox, and the airflow up one side was different to the airflow up the other. Now, fortunately, this was something I predicted with some mods that I've been doing on my car recently, but yeah, fixed it at the side of the road, and then cracked on with our day. But it definitely got put through its paces. I took my dad with me. Me and my dad like to do these trips together, and I feel like he has a lot of trust in me the way we were driving that car, knowing that I was the last guy to put it back together.
So did you get out on the Autobahn while you were there?
Yeah, we did. We quite a lot of miles on the Autobahn. I didn't just go to watch the Nürburgring 24, so I had about, I think it was just over 5 days there, and it's something like I've never experienced that trip actually. If you ever get a chance to go to the N24, then definitely do it. It's like, of course it's a race event, but there's almost like no boundaries because the track's so big. You can walk anywhere you want. You can, the only place that you can't go is like literally inside the paddocks. You can't get inside the pit. You can't get inside the pit lane. Everywhere else you can go, you can walk around the paddocks. You can see people changing tyres. You can see people rolling around bits of cars. You can see all the crash cars that have come off the track. You can literally go up to them and touch them. And then, around the GP circuit, it's quite, it's not restrictive, but they won't allow you to like climb up on top of buildings. Although they did used to allow that, they've stopped that now. As soon as you leave that GP area, it's pretty much the forestry, and you can walk to however far your feet want to take you. And in my case, it was about 25 kilometres a day. So we put a lot of miles in, and we saw a lot of the Nürburgring, but also saw a lot of forestry and wildlife, that's for sure.
Well, you got your steps in while you were there, while you were eating bratwurst and all the other delicious food I'm sure that they had at the track as well. I was going to ask you, so were you tempted to take your car on a top speed run while you were on the Autobahn?
So I came off, so I took the Eurotunnel there, and for those that don't know, we've got two options to get to mainland Europe from the UK. We've got the ferry, and then we've got the Eurotunnel, which is an underground, a train that goes under the sea basically. I took the Eurotunnel, and while I was on the Eurotunnel, I told myself, I'm not going to take it past 120. I had John McGurk in the back of my head saying, Josh, these tyres are shot, you should really change these.
The treads, where the water jackets are, there's some cracks starting to appear in those.
And I think 120 was being a little bit brave, but knowing these cars can go 170, 180, I thought 120 is my cap. And then it soon gets away from you. I think we touched 150, which it lapped it up. It's so easy to drive fast in these cars, and you don't realise how quick you're going. If I were doing that, I've been 150 in a Renault Clio before, and I felt that, but you don't really feel it in these.
Yeah. Was the Vantage nice and stable at that speed?
It was stable, but I did notice quite a lot of bonnet flex. I don't know if how fast have you taken your DB9?
I probably maxed out about 135, 140 on the track. I've not been looking at the bonnet at the time. I am like looking at turn one way at the distance.
I think the difference when you're driving on the Autobahn, so we went to Stuttgart to see the Mercedes Museum as well while we were there, which was like a 2.5 hour drive, and the majority of it was on Autobahn. I think it almost dumbs you down to it, when you're constantly travelling that sort of speed. It then becomes a norm, and you probably shouldn't, but you drive like you would drive 70 mile an hour. And it doesn't take long to adjust to that, and then when you actually have to slow down, when the Autobahn ends, you're like, why is everyone driving so slow? But it just feels normal. And I did notice when I was relaxing into the car a little bit, the bonnet flex is unbelievable. Just where the wind's catching it a little bit, you can almost see the bonnet rippling through the air.
Really?
So yeah, very, very odd experience. I were a little bit concerned for it at some points, but I don't know if you noticed the little rubber channels that go down the side of the wings on these.
Yeah.
They, when you take it past, I mean, some of them do it when you go normal speeds, but when you take it past at roughly 120, those rubbers just pop onto the outside because the wind going through the grille pushes the rubbers out. A neat little design quirk from Aston Martin, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. You know, do you think maybe that's not the hood isn't like clamp forced down tight enough at the front and it was letting more air under? So was the hood, was it like the front lip of the hood lifting, or was it just literally the flex in the hood itself?
No,
do you think?
it was just, I think it's just flex because they're quite thin aluminium, aren't they? I think it was just the flexing because, you know, the hood's secure. You can't once it's locked in, you can't move it, not by hand anyway. But then, yeah, when you look down your bonnet, maybe it is the way I've rebuilt it. If someone else has driven their car that speed, then let us know in the comments below if you've seen that. But I noticed the rubber seals, and I mentioned that to one of the guys while I was there that also had an Aston Martin, and he said, yeah, it's just a common thing with them. Those seals pop on the outside, and it looks super messy. And then you got to tuck them all in nicely, just to pop them back out again.
Just to make it look good again. Just to make it look good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, I had a similar experience with, not on the Autobahn, but with my Aston during, which is a DB9, right? I bought it in November, and then there was an Aston Martin Owners Club track day up at Thunder Hill Raceway near me, and I still had the original OEM tires on the car. So this was 2013. The car was built in late 2014. So these things were 9 years old, maybe 10 years old now, and I got to track day and did the tech inspection, and the guy's looking at the tire codes, and he's like, "You're not going to run those at speed, are you?" And I'm like, "I was going to use them up." And he's like, "You're crazy, man." And so I went out and I did my first track day ever in my DB9, and I drove, you know, thinking I was Mario Andretti, and I overheated the brakes and I overheated the tires. And when I came off the track at the end of the day, the tires looked like Formula One tires with all the clag stuck to them. There was like little melted bits of rubber all over, and I just destroyed my 10-year-old tires on my first track day. I were actually going to replace them before I went, but then I'm like, you know, if I drive carefully, I'm just going to be doing motorway miles. I may as well put 2,000 miles on these tires before and change them when I get back, right? But yeah. It doesn't happen. When I went to Stuttgart, we went with another guy. He had a BMW. It's a BMW 3 Series GT, and he's tuned it up, and it's a real sleeper. It looks like a normal everyday family car, but this thing like pops and bangs and spits flames, and super quick car. So I went in that car with him, and my dad stayed in my car, and he took off, and I don't know how quick we went. I think it's limited to 155, so he probably stopped at 155. And then I saw my dad approaching at a rapid pace behind me, and I'm like, oh my God, like, he has a lot more faith in that car than I do. But yeah, you're thinking about every bolt you tightened or didn't tighten. Should I have used a torque wrench?
That's what I said. I can forgive myself if I stick it into a hedge because, you know, something falls off. But if my dad does it, because he's had the faith in my rebuild skills, and then, you know, God forbid something happens to him because I didn't put it back together properly, I'm like, you need to slow this down a little bit because I don't trust myself that much.
Well, I saw your McGurk video as well. It was great that you went out and they went over the car, and that's actually an interesting idea. You know, it's like, well, I'd like somebody that's a pro then to check my work, and you know, you got a thumbs up other than just the aged tires, which are not, you know, it's just something you have to deal with still. They thought the rest of the car was in pretty sharp shape, which is terrific that now you've got a great car, you're able to drive it to Germany a couple thousand miles effortlessly and back, and you know, that's awesome. So
yeah, and coming out of that, it gave me quite a long list because it was almost perfect, but he gave me a list to make it perfect. So now I've got this list I can go through, and a lot of them were trivial on the day because it was stuff that I'd just not put on, like the grill socks were missing, that they were sat in my office because I was redesigning some replacements. So I'm working through that list now. So then once that's done, it will be as good as one of the ones that are sat in a forecourt, which feels good. definitely good to get that seal of approval. And John McGurk, for anyone that doesn't know that's not in the UK, he's one of the probably the most reputable aftermarket Aston salesman in the UK, that's for sure. He's definitely got a good reputation. And he's got a good taste in cars as well. He's got a Ferrari F40 that I'm trying to work on him to let me go out in.
Oh, your next project car. No, wait, you can't switch over to the Italian team. You have to sit and play with us in the Aston team for a while. Well, just before you left, I saw on the DIY Facebook group, you were starting to talk about something new you'd developed, which was you designed and built your own Airbox delete kit item, and you'd mentioned you were designing it to me, and I know I had done one. I bought a commercial kit, and I still have my props here for that. So this was made by one of the bigger companies that makes aftermarket parts for Astons, and it was two parts. It was a custom welded bracket, and then a conical sort of K&N style air filter in a banjo clamp. And so I ran these on my Aston for a couple of years, but I had to go out and shell out some real money to buy these. And so I was interested in what motivated you to do an Airbox delete kit for your car.
Well, to be honest, we didn't really cover it in the first video, I don't think, but one of the things I am doing in my spare time is I'm studying a motorsports degree. And with that, I get to have access to some industry standard airflow development software, and I've got all the CAD software that I can use. And part of me progressing through this degree is I need to make things and get good with this software, right? So rather than just make something hypothetical like most people probably would do, they'd be like, right, I'm going to design a spoiler for a Nissan 350Z. They might not own a 350Z, but all the stuff's out there on the open source internet for them to get the measurements to design that. I'd much sooner make something for my car that I can then try it and put it on, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So what? I'm still developing my skills, right? And I saw some of the existing ones. I didn't actually see the one that you had at the time, but I saw another one that it removed the airbox but retained quite a lot of the airbox fixings, and I thought, that just seems a bit of a backwards way about doing this, because one of the primary benefits of doing this is losing the weight from the car.
Right.
So by retaining those mounting fixing points, you're missing out on the primary benefit. And it also gave me an opportunity to actually delve into the real benefits of these airbox deletes, if there is any, which I'm sure we're going to get into the detail in this video. But there's a lot of misinformation out there on these airbox delete kits, that's for sure.
Yep. So do you have an example of what you made there, or a picture we can put up?
Yeah, so I mean, we'll get some clearer pictures for you, but this in essence is my version of the Airbox delete kit. I don't know how. Let me just
that looks good. Yeah, it's coming through. Yeah, and we might cut in a photo here. So
yeah, I'll get some photos. So this is, I've actually been testing a new material for this. So I have two 3D printers sat over there. I love making stuff with them. Really good tool to have. Definitely recommend getting one if you have the time, but they're definitely not something you can just pick up and use. You're buying a hobby, that's for sure. But I'm testing a material that's nylon inlaid with carbon fibre that is really good for motorsport applications. A lot of industries that provide this service call it the black aluminium or aluminum, depending on where you're from in the world, because it is just that strong. Now, of course, it does have its weaknesses. You could crack it if you over tighten it, but for the most part, its heat cycle ability is similar to that of aluminium. Its strength, you can also develop it so it's got flex. So, for example, this part is quite thick along the bottom, so there's absolutely no flex there. But because I've made it thinner here, there's a little bit of flex in these, which allows it to grab the pipework a little bit better.
Right, because that holds the mass airflow sensor, the mass airflow sensor tubing, right?
Yeah. So in fact, I've got a chassis leg here, or not a chassis leg, a crash can. So in essence,
like most people would have in their office at home.
Yeah. In essence, so I've got it the wrong way around. In essence, that's the front of your car, and this bolts into the existing bolt holes there, and then the pipe work will just run down and hold into that. But But then I noticed some other people do a very similar design to this. But then they retained it. I think yours is one of the ones that's retained with cable ties, right?
Yeah, so there's cable ties. So is yours, you've got a clamp over system. You reuse some of the hardware from the existing Airbox clamp?
I can't see a clamp to hand, but in essence, I've got another piece of nylon that comes over here and bolts in, and it uses two bolts that you take from your Airbox, because the minute you start trying to introduce aftermarket hardware into things like this, then the costs start ramping up. And my aim was to if I am going to produce this for people, I want to make it cheap. I want it to be a cheap alternative, and which brings me on nicely to the reasons you might want to get one of these, because there is quite a lot of misinformation in terms of some people think that you get like real power gains from it, and there could be an argument. I've not dyno tested any of them. I've not run any of them on a rolling road, so all this is speculation and speaking to professionals in the industry about it. But I don't think you're going to get any gains from doing an Airbox delete. For me, it's just these Airboxes are optimised for the cars, and even more so in my V8 application, because these Airboxes are probably more optimised towards your V12. So me then thinking that they're restricting my V8 is probably a bit of a long shot.
Yeah, well, that's what Mike's point from Bamford Rose is that Aston doesn't change the Airbox even on like the high 500 horsepower cars. They're using the same cartridges and the same Airbox, and he was skeptical that there'd be much of a power gain. I did dyno test my car. I did a baseline, and then I did a set of power pulls after I put my Airbox on. I think you're right. I mean, there was about 7 horsepower of power gain down in the low RPMs, but honestly, 7 horsepower on like 400 in a dyno test, that could just be noise from one pull session to the next pull session.
Yeah.
But at least it went
absolutely. Or a temperature change in the room, or anything like that. When you're talking that sort of brake horsepower on such a big machine like you're pushing there, it could always be negligible. You could go back tomorrow and it could be less. I'm not saying it, they might gain power. I'm not taking away from anyone that claims that their product gains power, but when I'm selling this, I'm not going to be selling it as a power gainer. That's my point, what I'm making.
So what other things are attractive about doing an Airbox delete kit? I know for me, one of the things was there is some minor weight savings, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You take at least with your kit and the one I was using, I stripped out the entire Airbox assembly on both sides. I substituted back in a bracket, and then basically you have this filter offsetting the weight of this filter, and but I think I did the calculation on my article. I think it was something like maybe 3 horsepower of weight savings, and it's 3 pounds.
Yeah.
Sorry, 3 pounds of weight savings, and it's weight that's ahead of the axle that we're getting rid of, which is also good weight to get rid of, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then what filter are you? I see you've got a filter in your hand there, so you've got a filter picked out to use with your kit?
Yeah, so this is, I guess this is similar to the filter what you've got, in form factor. This is made by a company called ProRam. These are a British brand. I didn't realise at the time they were only British, but fortunately they've let me open an account with them, so I can distribute them as I see fit now. But they're super cheap filters. And one thing I did look at when I was doing it is, could I get my own filters developed? Or could I get someone that already makes a filter and put my branding on it? And by the time you get to the end of it and you've contacted some Chinese company and try and get your name on there, it comes to a similar price to something like this. And these are a known good brand. I've used these in the past. I'd put these up there with K&N. And I think these for my build, I think I paid £34 per filter. That's cheap enough for me to not. These are reusable filters, but £34 is probably not even worth me washing them out. I might blow them out for the first service and then change them on the second service.
Are those a dry filter or an oiled filter?
So these are out of the factory. They are dry. You can run them oiled. However, I think running oiled filters on vehicles where the MAF sensor is so close to the filter is a very, very bad idea. I just think that it just gunks up your MAF sensor. Each to their own. You can run oiled, you can run dry, but I guarantee if you run oiled, you'll probably strip your car down at a later date and realise that your MAF sensor is, if it's not already died, it's well on its way to dying, and it's going to need a good bit of maintenance to bring it back from the dead.
Well, this is a good time to cut in the photo of my MAF sensor, and we'll put that up here in the broadcast. And in a recent article, I did a series on how to inspect your MAF sensor and how to clean your MAF sensor. And when I inspected my MAF sensor, it looked like it had been spray painted with mud. And I suspect that what was going on there might have been a little bit of what you were talking about. I don't have a before picture, unfortunately, to know what the state was before I put my Airbox Delete kit on. But my MAFs were covered in crud, as you can see in this photo. And then, after I cleaned them up, they look like this. And I'll insert a photo here. So it could very well be true then, running an oiled filter, I mean, that's probably, 4 inches from, the actual filter inlet. We're probably getting some mist or coming off of, the oil's picking up in the airflow and then depositing itself on the MAF in the middle of the airstream. So, which is bad because you can get, now the MAF is reading wrong, so you're going to get weird mixtures happening in the engine, and you're not going to be getting a horsepower gain. You're going to be getting a problem gain at that point.
And ultimately, even if it wasn't the oil, if it was just dirt, that just shows that the filters aren't doing the job right. Anything past that filter should be relatively clean. You are always going to get a little bit that comes past that's small enough particles to squeeze through the gauze what's in the filter. But I think I did see I think you sent me a picture of yours when you were cleaning them, didn't you? It looked like oil to me on the picture. It did look like an oily surface. I don't know how you cleaned it off. Did you use like isopropyl alcohol or something to clean that off?
Just MAF cleaning solution, just a pressurized can, you could buy down at the auto parts store, just instantly cleaned it right up. Brings me around to my next question though, is that I don't have the answer to this, is do the aftermarket filters filter the air as well as the OEM filter? And the engineer in me is probably thinking no, they can't, because probably the airflow gains that come from these K&N filters, that they're more porous. They let more air through easily, and then the OEM filters are designed for longevity of the engine. So a motorsport engine is not going to go 200,000 miles, where a street motor you're trying to get a couple 100,000. So did you do any research into filtration? I don't know if there's any specs out there on any of this stuff, on what they do.
So I mean, I've not done research specifically, but as I said before, my main trade is I'm an electrical mechanical engineer, and I work on generators, and a big part of my military career was working on generators in arduous environments, often very dusty, sandy environments. And you do find that, and I were aware of that coming in. I would say the best way of filtering your air is definitely this paper filter. But that being said, this paper filter is probably rated for 12,000 miles or something. Most cars of this era don't do that in a service interval. They will reach the time service interval before they reach their mileage service interval. So I think for people like us, not so much of an issue. If you were running a generator and that was like your main source of power for your house, then one of these is absolutely stupid. And one of these is perfect.
Yep.
But on the flip side of it, probably for most people, looking at average mileage, I'd say the average mileage of a Vantage is roughly 40,000 miles. Most of them are about 10 years old now. So, what's that, 4,000 miles a year? This will be fine for 4,000 miles in that year that you service it. And the good bit about these is, if you're really being tight, they are reusable. But I think for the money what they are, companies like, I don't even think the K&M ones are too expensive. Then you can just replace them as and when you see fit. Realistically, I've been in environments where I've just been blowing these out. If they've been getting full of dust, I'll just get an airline inside and I'll blow them out and I'll reuse them. There's no problem with that. But because they're so cheap, people replace them. But in reality, this is about as much as this now. So unless you go for the cheaper replacement what you've got, because that were always the benefit of using a paper filter. It's a cheap disposable filter. But now these are coming into a price point where this is almost as cheap and disposable, and probably, you know, more recyclable. This is just metal and gauze, whereas this is some horrible rubber material that probably couldn't ever be recycled.
I did an article recently on an alternative air filter, like this Aston Martin OEM filter set, I think was like $115 a set. The aftermarket filter I found from blueprint.com was like $26 a set. And like you say, if you can get, you know, these conical filters for around $30, $35 a set, something like that, you know, that's as cheap as the aftermarket paper filters. So that's pretty cool. So what other benefits might there be to doing an Airbox delete? Was there anything else that was floating your boat when you designed it?
Yeah, one of the biggest ones, and this definitely is not applicable to everyone, and I would say it's probably not going to be applicable to a lot of DB9 owners, as we made our distinction at the beginning that maybe the DB9 owners want to sit on the OEM side, and maybe the Vantage owners want to be a bit more noisy and cause a ruckus. But induction noise.
Yep.
Now, people often underestimate induction noise. They're like, oh, I want my car to sound a lot better, what do I do? And they'll start chopping back boxes off, removing cats. But induction noise is something that we associate with a powerful machine. Some of the more sportier versions of Aston Martins often have valves at the front, which basically is a flap on the front of the airbox. I think, just off the top of my head, it sits just on this side here, a flap here, and when you nail it or put it into sport mode or whatever the mode is on that particular model, that flap opens and you can hear a bit more induction noise. I didn't hear it to start with, but then when I was going through a tunnel and the walls were built up around me and I could hear my car sucking up the air from the front of the road, it was an absolute surreal sound from this. But it just makes it sound that little bit more aggressive and throaty. That being said, this is not on a flap.
Induction noise
so
was
it's
one of the things
always
that was
like
motivating
that.
me as well. And you definitely hear it even,
It's something I like.
like you say, you'll hear it in traffic if you've got a rig beside you, or if you're going down, you know, a neighborhood street where there's maybe, you know, sound barrier walls on the sides or something. You'll hear some of that induction noise coming back into the car. And, you know, it sounds pretty cool. You know, it's not like a Subaru Mega Turbo, you know, where you hear all the pop-offs going off and stuff like that. But some of us older guys appreciate the induction noise as well. And so that's a nice, you know, kind of that's a fun benefit, right? And I kind of like it, you know, because I've done a secondary cat delete kit as well, because I was trying to get my exhaust a little rowdier. And the induction noise change with the Airbox delete kit was also a nice treat that I enjoyed.
No, it is, and I feel like when these cars are developed, you've got a group of engineers sat around going, right, we'll put this big old engine in it, we'll put this lovely exhaust in, and then, you know, geographical rules hit it, and it's like, it can't be above this decibel, it can't emit this amount of, you know, this level of emissions. So, you know, other than the fact that you're potentially polluting the atmosphere a little bit more than you need to be, you're almost putting it to the standard what the people developing that car probably wanted it. You know, I would imagine the first time they ran it on the track, it maybe sounded a little bit different to what you buy from a factory. All these catalytic converters and real big back boxes and real big, you know, air boxes are generally an afterthought. By removing them, you know, you might have issues which we can go into after this, because there is a decent chance that an Airbox Elite could throw up an issue with a V8. But we've got a workaround, and that'll be good for anyone that's bought some of the other products, even the ones that I don't sell, that are having problems with theirs, because I've been deep in the forums, and there's a lot of people with problems from these, and we do have a fix.
Well, let's talk about that now. What are those issues that you see? Well, I've heard a couple of things. Let me throw one out first. That, you know, people were talking about if you take out your airbox, one of the intake pipes on the front of the airbox is the cold air ram, you know, from behind the grill and funnels it in. And on my car, I had to use a big giant tie wrap to sort of stabilize that pipe. And then, you know, the inside of the fender well cavity becomes essentially the de facto airbox. But then somebody I saw was well, geez, if you get a lot of water in there, you could get, you could hydrolock your engine and damage it. Or if you get into a deep puddle, now you've got your snorkel sitting down there, potentially in the water. And I guess in those particular scenarios, it's possible. I'm not so sure that the Airbox would have saved you from the same fate. But it's certainly an encapsulated sort of safety zone around the OEM filter, and it has a little drain in the bottom of it, so some water is getting in there. But did you think anything about, water infiltration or anything like that? Or
so when I did my design specifically, the reason why I made this tubular design that doesn't require any mounting point on the airbox is that I can then slide the tube up, which raises the filter up. And I wanted to try and get the filter, I don't know how your RAM air intake is on your DB9, but I wanted to try and get the filter at somewhat the same height as the RAM air intake. So therefore, if your filter was going to get wet, you were basically going to suck it up with the RAM air anyway. So that argument is kind of debunked. But that being said, if your filter was submerged and you were worried about sucking up water, it would have to be fully submerged for you to have an issue. It's like I saw a great analogy on one of the forums. It's like trying to suck up water through a straw, but your straw's got holes all the way up. You just suck air in until all the holes were fully submerged, and that's in essence what this is. There's loads of holes around here. If it came up to here, the air would just come in this. You might get some misty, damp water, but that's going to be no more detrimental to your engine than a foggy day or a very humid environment. Water doesn't kill engines. Hydrolock kills engines. So a little bit of water in there, it's not great. You're best off not having it, but it's not absolutely detrimental to your engine. Sucking water in, because as you know, water cannot be compressed. That's when the engine hydrolocks, and
it's over.
Even then, even then, it's not necessarily completely knackered. You as long as you fix that the right way and stop your engine immediately and pull your plugs out and turn your engine over and release that hydrolock, you're fine. But what a lot of people do is they try and start it and they're in their head, they're like, well, maybe I can cycle the water through the engine and turn it into a water pump. But yeah, I mean, for me, that was a bit of I feel like there were people commenting on it that they thought of an idea but didn't really think about the all ins and outs. And that being said, even if I had my airboxes on, I'm not going through puddles in that Aston. I'm not wading in that Aston, no way. And if I did, I'd be as worried if I had my airboxes or if I didn't have my airboxes, because the chances are the airboxes are cracked on most cars anyway because they crap.
Well, there's the moral of the story: is don't go wading through deep water with our Aston, because the airboxes are down right at the lower front corners of the bumper. So even like probably 8 inches of water is starting to risk it too much. And I don't know many Aston owners that are going to go wading around in deep puddles, so probably not an issue. So what was the...
Well, fortunately, the parts what I got from to fix my car was a guy that drove through a puddle. So keep doing it, and I'll keep fixing cars.
Well, what's the other issue that you were worried about, or the imbalance issue? So what's that you were talking about for the Vantages?
Yeah, so this is more particular to the V8 Vantage. I've not done that much research on the V12 just because I've obviously been able to put my theories into practice on my car. Now, the issue what you've got with this design is the V8 has got a single plenum or a single intake manifold on top of the engine, whereas your V12 has got 2 individual plenums. But from my single intake manifold, it splits into a Y piece in front of the throttle body and then goes down to the airboxes after it's past the MAF sensors.
Right.
So the issue what you've got is you've got these 2 individual MAF sensors on each side of the car. They're measuring individual airflow for each bank of cylinders. So basically the ECU reads it as one inline 4 and another inline 4.
But they're combining still.
Yeah, it takes the measurement from the left side for the left side of cylinders and the measurement from the right side for the right side of cylinders. So then when it takes that in difference and tells it to fuel the right side differently because it's got a different amount of air, it's actually not, because they're mixing. A massive design flaw in that, and I've spoken to some very knowledgeable people about this, and the only reason that we can come to as to why Aston did that is because at the time there wasn't a MAF sensor that could flow enough air that could be placed in one situational point in front of the throttle body, because that's ideally where it would be. So then it measures all the air going into the plenum and mixes that with fuel accordingly. And that's where the RAM air comes in. So the RAM air connects the two airboxes and effectively makes that one closed loop system. So all the air comes in the front, it goes through the sensors, and by that point it's dispersed. When you remove these boxes, you open them up to a bit more atmospheric pressure, which in turn could leave them to a bit of a side wind maybe goes into one wheel arch. It'll put more air at one side, which in the V8 case, like I said, it'll trick the engine into thinking it needs to overfuel one side when it doesn't, because it's all being mixed eventually. But I ran my car on purpose in a more fault state, i.e. I removed the RAM air to see how common that would be. Because when I first came up to this situation, I was like, well, even if there's an imbalance, even if there's a difference in airflow from this mod, as long as each side is a matching difference, so they're balanced, it shouldn't be a problem. So I made a real point on making sure everything was symmetrical. And I think that's where people have probably gone wrong with the other air filter mods, what they've done to the V8. If that pipe's just twisted at 3 or 4 degrees, that changes that angle further up. So as the airflow goes in, it banks into the outside of the edge of that and potentially misses the MAF sensor, which then could give a false air reading, which then means that your fuel air mix ratio is not as you'd want it to be. But the way I fixed that is by making everything symmetrical, and I did get the one fault while I was away, and that's exactly the fault what we're talking about now. And that was at the exact same time that the BMW in front of me felt a massive side wind come across him, nearly blew him off the road, and then my car threw up a fault. And I put that down to the fact that I didn't have my RAM air on. It's blown right into the wheel arch, through the pieces of fiberglass that hold the radiator, into the wheel arch, and just overhead that side. Didn't cause any issues, because for that split second it had the wrong fuel air ratio, and then it corrected itself. But it let me know that there were a problem. So I came to the side of the road, read the code, found out with that code, cleared it, checked it, make sure all my pipes were connected as they should be, and then carried on driving, and there were no more issues thereafter. That being said, now I'm going to fit that RAM air system and try and make that an airtight seal, which might require me 3D printing another bracket, which basically mounts, you mounted yours with a cable tie. I'm going to try and print a receiver that fits into that fiberglass bit and mounts that pipework. So like you said, I'm going to turn them wheel arch wells into a
giant airbox. Yeah, a plenum chamber for the whole thing. Well, that's cool. Yeah. I'll be interested to see the development you do on that, because that was something the kit I was using had made no even comment on, was like the RAM air pipe was just sort of flopping around. I'm like, well, I can't leave that. That's just going to make noise. And I ended up using like an HVAC big heavy duty zip tie, and I strapped it on, pointing right at sort of the center of the body of the filter itself. But yeah, it'd be really cool if you made some sort of bracket that somehow snapped over the filter itself and then had sort of an alignment internal thing or something like that just kind of pointed it right at it. That'd be kind of neat, like a spider web thing. But you're the designer, not me. So I'll leave it to you.
What I tend to do with this sort of stuff anyway, I take it to the limit of what I know, and then I offer like a prototype run. And I think I've sent out 7 of these now, and I've done it at a super reduced rate. It's it's barely covering material costs, but the idea is they fit it, they come up with their solution to the problem, like yours, where I put a big cable tie around it, and then at the end of it, I get the information back and I can further develop the part. So hopefully, that's my solution right now, but someone might come up and be like, I found a way I can reroute this. But we have to remember that the GT4 and the race cars run this sort of setup. So it's not like we're delving into the unknown here. And another reason to remove the airbox is because it allows you to run cooling ducts for your brakes.
Yeah, now you have some space where you could get a cooling, instead of having the fake cooling duct inlet on the front of the bumper, you can actually you can open that inlet up and run a pipe past, because now there's space in that plenum area to get it back to the wheel.
And arguably, cooling your brakes from a track or performance point of view is way more important than any airflow anyway, because that's probably going to be the first thing what's going to fail on anyone that's tracking these cars, certainly an amateur, because you're going to be stomping on them brakes too hard.
Oh, I destroyed my brakes I destroyed my tires in my first track day, and I absolutely glazed and cooked my brakes. It was the very first photo on my blog was a picture of me peeling apart, the pads from my rotors. They were all like multicolored and warped. I destroyed my brakes, on my track day. And so you're right, brake cooling is, maybe that'll be another product you'll develop in the future, is some...
No, and I'm looking into it, and to be honest, it'd be a cheap thing. It just requires a bit of hose. That's it. Done.
Yep.
Run some hose and somehow fix it. And if I print a nice neat bracket like this, it's half the size that just holds it and directs it onto your brakes, then you want to buy this sort of kit for a GT4 car from Aston Martin, you're going to be paying thousands of pounds, but it's a bit of hose.
Well,
we're not reinventing the wheel. We're applying air to a hot area.
Well, that's the interesting thing about what you're doing, Josh, and I appreciate is that you're even developing parts for the car. You're coming up with nice solutions. That bracket you designed looks terrific. Hopefully that'll work on a DB9 at some point. And if you do a brake duct cooling kit, I'm sure other people will be interested in buying that as well. And the best part is, though, you get to fit it to your car and have it just the way you want, as you continue to evolve your car.
And that's it. And I'm in a stage now where I'm really enjoying doing stuff. I'm really enjoying designing stuff. I'm really enjoying fitting it to my car. And I'm not at a business level yet where I'm like, we put all this R&D into this, give me all your money. That's not where I'm at. I'm making it for myself anyway. If someone wants it, they can have it. There's no guarantee, there's no warranty, there's none of that here. You want guarantee, you want warranty, go to one of these big companies. But I'm making stuff for my car. If people want a copy of it, they can have a copy of it. But another thing, what was quite shocking, I don't know if you've experienced this when you've been working on VWs, but did you notice that, well, certainly on my V8, there's no air straighteners at all. There's nothing to straighten the airflow going through the MAF sensor.
No, yeah, it's inches from the front. It's not in a laminar airflow at all yet at that point. It's just doing the luck of the draw averaging, I think.
Yeah, well, I've got something here that I have been developing, and this little piece here, that slots. So basically, I've copied the ones from VW, what I know, but this slots into the end of the pipe. I haven't got a pipe here now because it's on my car, but this slots into the end of the pipe, and it's got a little lip on it there, so it can't go in. And that gives it a little bit more laminar airflow. I thought that was the problem with the imbalance of the MAFs. Turns out it weren't, but it's not going to hurt. So I've got them in my car now as well. I'm just testing them at the moment. But there's a metal version of this you can buy from America as well.
Oh, that's
but by
cool.
the time I've imported it, it gets quite expensive for me. So I just designed my own and printed it. But that should straighten the airflow, and when I took that apart, that's like 101 on my aerodynamics lessons. What I've been doing, it's like when you're measuring airflow, let's get it straight. Like the first thing that you should do, get that airflow straight, and like you said, where it is, it's as soon as it enters a filter, so you're heavily reliant on the filter straightening that air, which it's not going to do because it's hitting a corner straight away. Which is why I was so focused on making sure each side was symmetrical, to the point where I think personally, I've not got any study to back this up, but on this filter there's a little metal bar where the sticks line is. I think that orientated in the wrong place on one side, different to the other, could cause enough of a difference to offer an imbalance in the MAF. Just because if the air was coming in at that point and deflecting around the MAF, which it could possibly do, what is it, a 5mm hole that needs to go through? Symmetry is key on these.
I look forward to seeing Josh's first wind tunnel set up in your house there, so that you can start to visualize what's going on.
Well, I've been doing some tests in a virtual environment. So I've built the pipework in a virtual environment and I've run some air through it just to see how much difference it does make when it's been rotated. It's not as large as I would have hoped. It doesn't display as much of like tangible data as what you'd expect, but it definitely makes a difference. So yeah, if you have got one of these kits from any of the other companies, I won't give any of them a plug, but there's a few out there, and you're having issues, take it apart, make sure everything's symmetrically placed. And if it is, maybe try get one of these. Like I said, there's an American company that makes metal ones. If there weren't so much import tax, I'd definitely buy one of them. The only reason I printed them is because they don't make them in the UK right now. But yeah, definitely look into that, smoothing your airflow over your MAF.
All right, Josh, well, I think we've probably talked about everything I can think of for an Airbox delete kit at this point in time. I did want to do a shout out that you are selling your kit. It's through detailcoremedia.com, which is your site where you post things. And I'll throw that up on screen here so people can see how to get a hold of you if they were interested in getting one of your kits to play with, and just to reach out to you in general.
Yeah, brilliant. No, yeah, for anyone that is interested in these, like I say, we're still in the prototype stages of it. That being said, they are well cheap. So if you want to test it for me, I generally send people free things that test for me as well. So if I, like for example, once I developed these, the people that ordered these got a set of these just to run as a test as well. I appreciate anyone that's willing to put a product that I've designed onto their valuable Aston Martin. Like, you know, that shows faith in me. Obviously, I do it to my own. It's not like I'm just test this on your car and let me know how it works.
Yeah, let me know how it works. Yeah. Well,
but, yeah,
I mean,
I appreciate anyone that wants to do this, but ultimately, I think it's a good product and hopefully it works. And it's not going to have any changes to the final one. But once it's gone through that approval stage, the price is obviously going to bump up.
All right, well, get it while you can, and you can say you're an early adopter. So, all right, Josh, well, thanks very much, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, nice to speak to you, Steve. Catch you later.
Bye for now.